Okay, in this video we're going to be talking about shear reinforcement above columns, so drop panels typically, also internal just additional reinforcement over the column, and then lastly we're going to talk about internal beams. So I'll illustrate soon. With these drop panels, and if I can just go Control 2 to make them transparent, I've already got some reinforcement in the columns just to give it a bit of context. Now, with the drop panels, normally you would have like an upside down hat in here, and if you just go and Google drop panel reinforcement layouts in your browser, you'll see heaps of examples of how they do that. But this is fairly common, but not that common in Australia. There are also the proprietary options where you can physically go and buy shear stud or shear uh, um, it's almost like shear beams that they can put over the column. They're very expensive though, and a lot of the builders avoid them, or customers or clients avoid them, and they opt for the reinforcement solution. But that's a very nice solution as well. But we're going to stick to reinforcement as these are reinforcement videos. So yeah, we've got two identical. The difference between these two is this one is modeled in a way that you've got your slab, and then the drop panel is actually it goes all the way to the top of the slab. And this one, however, we've got the slab, and the drop panel only goes up to the soffit of the slab. So we'll put bars in differently with these two to get the best out of it. Now the third option, and for this I'll just bring my little sketch across. So in Australia, it's fairly common to have a layout like this, where you have a column, and then as an additional to your slab reinforcement, they will have bar specified 820s at 300 in the fourth layer. Now in Australia, the notation is they work from the bottom as the first layer, top is the last layer, it's a four layer. So in Tekla terms, that would be a T1, top layer 1, and the length of this bar will be 2.5. On this one, we've got the 8/16s at 253, which means it's a top 2, and the length of those bars are 3.1. And now the other option where we're talking about internal beams is quite often on the rebar layout, you'll see the column and you'll see a little annotation that says look at detail 1 on this drawing. And if you go to detail 1 on that drawing, you'll see that they've specified 8 closed loop leakages, which is N12s at 125, and that's pretty much the same on all sides in this case. They also have a bit of a 50 millimeter offset here from the column, just so you don't end up with a lot of clashes. And then they've got lacer bars, which is 212 top and bottom, just to sort of frame it. So we're going to be doing all three of those in this video. So I think for this exercise, what I'm going to do is I will open a view. Now this is our rendered view. So we want to work on the top, and that's at level 3000. So if I go to my views and I go to view list, I can then go and click my plan at 3000. I also want to elevation on grid line 2. So if we go to grid line 2 and pull them both across, they're both across, I can flick back to my rendered view. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these two, because those are the two ones that we want to work with. I'll grab those two, right click, fit workspace in all views. So we only see those two columns in all our views. And then I'll also go Control P and just make sure that they're all aligned. Okay, so let's go to the 3000. Let's do this one first. So I'll show you both methods of putting in the same bar. So when a concrete is modeled all the way to the top, you can take advantage of the crossing bar in Tekla, just the crossing bar part. But when you don't have it modeled all the way to the top, then you sort of lose a bit of the the faces don't go all the way up to the top that you want, so you lose a bit of the benefit there. You're going to have to stretch and add faces too much. Then more point input becomes a better option. I'll show both of them. So let's start with this one. So let's put the top hats into this one first, with the upside down top hats. I'll go for crossing bars, and I'm just going to wing it. I don't have an example like in the other two, so I'll just wing this one. So in this one, we'll go in, let's just pick a 16 bar, and I will make it yellow to stand out nicely. And I'm not going to worry about the start and end offset. We'll figure that out now. And the target is 200. I'll just leave it like that. And now when we hover over this one, you can see we're seeing the full depth. If we hover over the other one, you can see we're only seeing half the depth. Okay, so let's use this one, yeah. And then I'm not going to select all the sides. I'm going to pick this vertical, the bottom, and then the opposite vertical. And I'm going to say OK. And then while I've got that tool going, I might as well pick this side and then do the same thing. This vertical, bottom, and the other vertical, and say OK. That pretty much gives us the layout at the bottom. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure, if it's not on, make sure that your leg faces are on. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to click on this bar. And when the leg faces shine up, we want to click on this edge. And then holding your control and drag it. Let's say 400 mils, and add another leg to it. We can do the same on this side. Click the bar, click the edge, and then holding control and drag it. And that gives us another leg. Let's repeat on this bar. Click there, drag it 400. And sometimes when you get to a position where it's sort of lining up with another edge, like a concrete edge, it will try and snap to it. And then lastly, we'll do this one as well. So that sort of sorts out all of that. And we do need to go and look at faces. Let's just go over to the element, and that seems to have worked all right. You can see this is our main, and we'll have to look at the top where they slot in when we put in our slab reinforcement, just to make sure they're all okay. Okay, I think that's okay. So for this one, we're going to have a different approach. So if we go if we go back to the crossing bars, that's not going to work. If we do this and we go click bottom top, you can see once we've done that, we need to bring those bars to the top. Now what you'll have to do is click on here and then start stretching this by grabbing this arrow to there, and once you've got that, you can then click on this edge, holding your control, and stretch it away. So it can be done, but it's an extra step of stretching. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to undo all of that, and then I'm going to go into the elevation view. I'm going to go to this elevation, and we don't have a snapping point there, and even if I use perpendicular, Tekla won't find the side. So what you're going to do is just take an L for a construction line and draw up a little bit, and the same on this side. So we can just define an intersection point there, and then it's as simple as go more, point input, and just trace the shape of the bar around the concrete, like so. And don't even worry about your legs, you can fix them later. And once you've got that, the shape is defined, and now then if we go to the 300 again, and we just go control P for the top view, you can see there's our bar, and we can say the range is between that point, and that will give us the result. Now I'm not going to do all of that in this one. It's just to show you an alternative way, but what you must take note of is that in this one, for instance, we will have to check the layering. Like in this case, if we click on that bar, we can see that this bottom face, the cover is on the wrong side. So all you have to do is in here just say flip the bar, and it flips that face only because we highlighted that face. The next thing we need to do is if you click on here, right click, and you go to inquire, you can see that your A and your B dimension is odd dimensions, and maybe we want to force 400. So what we can do in this case is we can click on the bar, and we can say in detail, and we can load our standards, and then say for the hook type we don't want a hook, and then for the adjustment type we want a leg length, and for the leg length value we want to do 400. Okay, so with that we can just hover over this edge here. There we go, that's 400 now, and if I click on this one as well, that will be 400. And now if I interrupt, click on the bar, right click, the bar, click on the bar, right click, and say inquire, you can now see we've got our O dimension at 400 and our E dimension at 400. So that's like perfect. Now we do need to do it on these as well. So for those, and I'll just right click to show. If we go inquire, you can see we've got arbitrary values here. Excuse me. So just to ensure we've got the right leg we want there, we'll keep our settings as we had before, and then we can just click on this one and hover over to the other side, click on this one, and then the other legs, click on this one, in detail, pick this side. You can see as I click on it, Tekla immediately fixes up the leg length. And now in both these cases, if I click on that bar, inquire, we have our 400, 550, 550, 400, and then the bottom leg is 1450. And if we look at the other one, this one will have a different depth. We've still got our 400. Now we've got 530 instead of 550 because of that difference there, and then 400. So that worked out pretty well. So now that we've got that, what we can do now is just put in some bottom and top reinforcement to show it in context. So for that, I'll just go straight to our, and I won't use the elevation for that. I'll use the level at 3000. So in here, what I'll do is I'll go by face, and I'll just load the standards again, and 12s in this case is okay. I'll just make it 12 main rather than 12 ligature. And then for the class, I'll stick to 2, and we'll do the offset the minute, and the spacing at 200 is fine. So let's just leave that. Then what I want to do is over here, I want to create it on the near face. That's this face closer to me. I don't know what the direction is going to be. I'll just pick a direction, and I do want the whole face. So as soon as I hover over this, you'll see that Tekla sort of lights up where it's going to put the reinforcement, and the side you pick is going to be the main one. So you can see our orientation at the moment shows bars in that direction, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want it in both directions, and then again, if I hover over that, it will create the bar, and then I can just go and pick the bottom and hover over the same, and you can see the polygon that Tekla is showing you there, and if I click that, it will show us bottom reinforcement. And now all we need to do, Control P, is just go and look at our spacing quickly. So if I pick all of them and I just make it, say for instance 100 by 100, just to get it away off the edge a little bit so it looks better, we can now see all the reinforcement in there. And now we need to just finalize our layering. So you can see because we put these yellow bars in before the red ones, and because these are secondary, let me just give them a different color so it's a bit more obvious what's happening here. So these red bars on top should be in layer 1. So if I click on, now one note I want to do before I do that is, if you click on this bar and you click here to say move to the outermost, what it's going to do is just going to flip all these around, and that's not what you want. You want those yellows to stay where they are. So in this case, you click on the face and you change that face from 1 to 2, and that will only manipulate that bar, and it will not screw up the other bars. So you can see that's exactly what we want. We'll have a look at that bar now, and then for the green bar, click on the face again and just make sure it's in the second layer, and that's correct. And then for these bars, if I click on these yellow bars, this face and that face cannot be in layer 1, it's got to be in layer 2. So if I click there, layer 2, you can now see that Tekla puts that into the layer for us. And at the bottom, we can just check the bottom 2 layers to make sure. So if I click on that layer, that's 1, that's correct. If I click on this green one, click on its face, that's layer 2, that's correct. So that all works out quite nicely. Now, in terms of bars that clash that sit on top of each other like this one, what we could do here is with this one is we can just say that these are, let's say 50 off the side, just to get them away from the corner a bit there. And then these can be the same. Although Tekla's come up with 84, so let's leave it like that because it's obviously calculated where the rounding of that bar is. So that looks pretty good. Nothing is clashing now. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, now let me rather grab it in rendered view. I'll grab this one, right click, fit in all views, so we only see that one. And then what I'll do is I'll also go control perspective. I'll put it up in its perspective view so we can see nicely what this looks like. And then what we can do to really make it stand out, just to show what we've achieved, is we can go to our reinforcement view. Okay, and there we go. Okay, and then lastly, if we go to our presentation, what we can do then is say show the 12s, because that's what we've got in the slab. We can say show them as a light gray, and also show them as 90% transparent, and also show the concrete as 90% transparent. And once I've done that, save, modify, apply, okay. If we now zoom up here, we can now see clearly what we've achieved. So you can see the light gray transparent bars is the reinforcement for the slab, and the yellow bars are the shear drop panel reinforcement. You can also see the column reinforcement sticking out nicely there. So that's a pretty good solution. It's a very easy thing to reinforce, and you can get it clash free pretty quickly. So let's move on to the next example, and I'll just flick back to my standard view here. I'll also go to a orthogonal, modify OK, and in this I'll go entire model. Okay, so this one here we don't need anymore. I just showed the alternative, so I'm going to delete that. And then what we're going to do is let's focus on this one. So for this one, I'm also going to isolate this, grab this, right click in all views. So we should see only that one in 3D and in the elevation. Okay, so what we're going to do with this one, I'll just drag my sketch in again, is we're going to go for this option where we have you know, 820s at 300 in the top one layer, and then 8 N16s at 250 in the top two layer with the different lengths of bar. So we'll just take note of that. I'll drag it away again. So for that, I'm going to go over to layer 3000. Now, what would have been very nice is if we had the ability to go to edit and go construction object and go poly offset, and then take, and maybe we should just do some calculations first before we fill that in. So they want 8 N20s at 300, which means it's 7 spaces. So 7 times 300 is 2.1. If we divide that by 2, we need to offset that by 1050. So if we could click in here 1050, and we could use the grid line to offset, that would have been fantastic. But Tekla can only offset from construction lines at this point. So if we draw a construction line along the center there, just make sure it clicks. Along the center, we draw another construction line along this center of the grid line. And we try and offset now, Control O, and we plug in our 1050. Again, if we click on the bar, you can see it selects the bar, but it won't offset it. So the workaround here is to just purely go into your, just kill that, just mark that, go into your eye, your visible, and say switch off my grids, just for the minute. And now if you go Control O, you plug in your 1050, you can now pick that construction line, and just like that, it now offsets it. So that's the range, and the length is 2.5, so it's 1250. So if we type in here 1250 and we offset these, that is the area of influence of the top bar. So what we can do now is we can go to Rebar, and we can go to Face, and the bar he wants is 20s. I'll keep it yellow, and I will make these 0 because we're working with absolute. It's got to go from there to there, the middle of the bar. So it's got to be 0, not cleared. And then the number of, he wants 8 bars. So what we do is we plug in 8 bars here. And I think that's it. And then we've just got to say we want this on the near face. And I don't know what orientation we're going to have, so I'll just pick one. And we don't want the whole face, we only want a rectangular face. And now what we can do is we can click on this area, and we can see our orientation of our bars are wrong, so we pick the other one. And once we pick the other side, Tekla gives us our 8 bars with the correct length. Okay, so now what we can do is we can delete those few grid lines, and we can offset for the other direction. And if you do a redraw and your construction lines disappear, just make sure that your construction lines are on this eye. So if we do that, they're back. Okay, now for the other direction, if we look at here, he wants 8 at 250, so it's 7 times 250, and he wants them 3.1 long. So if we go and we say Control O, and we do 1550, that's for the length of the bar, and the length is along this path. And then for the spacing, he wants 7 times 250 divided by 2, so it's 875 a side. So if we plug in here 875, we can then offset these two construction lines just like that. Okay, so now that we've got that, what we can do is we can go to our face again, and this time we want 16. So if we grab the 16 bar main, I'll keep them at color 6, and then 0, 0, and 8 bars, and everything else is the same. So again, make sure that you're on selecting by rectangular area, and if we pick here now, we can see the orientation of our bars are incorrect. So we just flick it over here to the other direction, and then we can click, and just like that, we've got our reinforcement. Now what we can do is just get rid of those construction lines. We can also bring back our grids. Okay, so let's look what happened. So if we look at this now, we can see we've got this in layer. So if I click on yeah, on the bar itself, and I head over to my custom inquiry, and we make sure that you select on this drop down list the rebar, you can see we've got this in the T1, the top 1 layer. And if we click on the other bar, you can see that's in the top 2 layer. And I'll just switch off my leg visibility for this exercise. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's just put in some reinforcement in the top of the slab. So I'm going to go to the near face, which is the top from where I'm looking at, and I'm going to do both faces, and I'm going to pick the whole panel. And then because this is the main direction, I'm going to make sure that my cursor is closer to this side, so it puts those bars in the top face. Also, I need to check what bars I'm putting in, so I'm going to stick to, say for instance, main 12s, and I'll make them a different color. And for this, I'm going to actually delete the start and end offset, and I'm going to make distribution by target, and the target's going to be 200. I think that's cool. Okay, so now that we can pick our polygon and say click, and that adds the reinforcement for us. And then we can pick the other the bottom of the slab, the soffit, click, and that adds that. Now the first thing that I like to do is I take my, so this has actually gone different to what I thought. So if we click on this one, we can now say that's interesting, that one came out right, but this one I must have just been closer to some other line. So what I can do is put back on my visibility, click on this one, click on this face, and say instead of 4 you have to be in 1, so it pushes that up. And this one, instead of 3, it's got to be in layer 2, so that sorts that out. Okay, so now what we can do is just make sure that these are on the right layer. So that's in 1, that's correct, and click on this one, and that's in 2, that's correct. So for the secondary layers, I like to make them green, just for, sorry, I like to make them green just for you know, to separate them from the main. So we get that. Now if we look at that, we'll see that we've got the yellow bars you know, in layer 1 with those, and we've got in the opposite layer, we've got those yellow bars in layer 2. Now if we go to the elevation, you can see that Tekla uses the bigger bar for the offset, so the cover is measured to this, and the second layer is then determined to the bottom of this one, not this one. So essentially on site what will happen is this will just drop down onto that bar, but it's fine the way that Tekla is showing this. And then in terms of the spacing, Control P, what I'll do here is I'll just go grab both of those, which is the slab reinforcement. I'll just add, say, 100 millimeters on both ends, 100, and yeah, I think that's good for this illustration. It's not clashing anywhere. It's not touching other bars. Okay, so for the visual, we can do exactly the same what we did with the others, just to have a look at what's happened now. If I double click, I can go first to perspective, modify OK. And then for the view, I can just go and pick our rebar size and then have a look at what's happened here. So you can see here, if we look at this, how nicely our column reinforcement comes in. We've got our gray transparent bottom and top reinforcement for the slab, and then the magenta and the yellow bars obviously being different diameter. This is a 20 and this is a 16, depending on how you've set up your rebar size presentation. This will come up, but it gives you a very nice visual of what you've actually done, and to quickly see if there's any problems with clashing and stuff. And as you can see there, we have absolutely no problem. I know this looks fairly simple because I've just got a little patch of slab, probably about a 4 by 4 meter slab. You probably have more, but you know, if you have clashes with column reinforcement and stuff, you'll just have to move them out of the way. Also a fairly easy task. So what I'll do is I'll go back to standard mode, and then also I'll go to an ortho view, and then what we can do is right click, fit entire, and lastly we're going to be looking at this. Now for this one we're still going to be working on 3000, but we're not working on grid 2 anymore, so I'm going to kill grid 2. We want grid 5. So what I'll do is I'll go view and I'll go grid 5, but I also think we need grid B in this case. So I'm at the same time just going to open B as well. So we've got A and B open. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go back to the rendered view, and I'll pick this one, right click, fit work area in all views. Okay, so now we pretty much have that's level at 3000, which is the top of the column, and this is our B elevation, and this is our grid 5 elevation. Okay, so what we can do now is we can have a look at our sketch again. So what we want to try and do is we want to put in these ligatures, which are 12s, N12s at 125, and there's 8 of them, and they start 50 millimeters off the column, whatever that dimension is, and it's the same on all the ends. And pretty much it's the width. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can see the hatch part there. As long as this bar sort of crosses over the column, you know, I think it'll be good, you know. So it's you know, they've not dimensioned this, which tells me they're not critical about the dimension. So you know, you've pretty much got to sort of try and avoid the vertical reinforcement of the column. I think that's the aim here. So let's just see where we plot. I mean, your scenario might be totally different, but we're just going to try and avoid the column reinforcement, these blue verticals you see here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a construction line. Now I've got a shortcut L on my keyboard that gives me a construction line, but if you don't know where it is, it's obviously under edit construction object. You can see it's highlighted there because it's active. And then what I like to do is and now I've just disabled it, so we'll just fix it. What I like to do is I hover over the point, and then I hold in my control key and click. That gives me a temporary snap, and now I can move up to the edge of the slab, and you can see the red, which means that's only the first points at the edge of the slab. And now I can go down, and that's how I quickly get you know, my construction lines drawn. So we've got those two, that, and the same here, control click, edge, opposite edge, and then over there control click, edge, opposite edge. Okay, so that basically gives us the band we want to work in. Now, the first thing that I've noticed, now I've got a Control O keyboard shortcut for copy with offset, but what we can do in here is we can go and plug in a 50 there, and the first thing we can do is now, because this is not on the grid line, it's not on the object, it's sort of on freehand, I can now select it and offset it. I'll do the 50 millimeters that the engineer is asking for clearance, and then we'll do a bit of maths. Now he's asking for 8 bars at 125, 8 ligatures at 125, which means that we need to do 7 spaces. So it's 7 times 125, it's 875. Okay, so what we can do now is we can go Control O, and in here we can plug in 875, and then we can just offset these. Now we know that's the full extent of where the bars are going to go. Now, the reason why I'm doing these construction lines is because these are all internal faces to a slab. There's no concrete to click on. So we need something to click on to establish the range and the extent of the bar. And that's pretty much what we need. I'll just escape out of that. The second thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to type F to get a measurement tool going. And what I want to do is just measure this gap there. So that's 400. That's basically from that 50 millimeters to the opposite 50 millimeters. I'm going to do the same on this side. Click from there to there and just put it there somewhere, and that's 900. Okay, so I'll remember that because that's important when we put in the ligatures. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I've got to pick a dominant side, which band is going to run through and which is going to be a secondary to that one. So if we look at the sketch, yeah, again, the engineer didn't actually show. There might be a history to this particular project that I'm not aware of and I don't know, and I don't have the detail because this is just a clip I got. But I'm just going to follow this. I'm going to assume this big one is going to be the dominant one and the small one's going to be the secondary one. So let's just use that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the grid line 5 elevation, which is this one, grid line 5. And in here, I'm going to go to Rebar, and under Rebar, I'm going to go to More, and I'm going to go to Point Input. Make sure that I pick Linear, and then for my Rebar, I'm going to select a 12 tie because that's what he's asking for. For the class, I'm going to select a 5. And then for the start, I'm going to make sure that I select 0. And remember, a 0 is different to a blank. If you leave that start and end open, Tekla calculates an auto offset based on the rounding of the bars it fits into. If you make it 0, Tekla forces a 0. Then that bar will be smack bang in the center of wherever you picked. For the spacing, I am going to say a target spacing, and this one is going to be 125. All right, so with that in mind, let's just add. Now, I want to draw a ligature in here. So again, the way I do it is I hold in my control key, click on that point because it's a known point, and that becomes my first point. And then I can go across, and I know my column is 800. Click, down, 300, click, back, click, and then just finish off to where we started. And now I can say middle mouse, so you can see our ligature there. And now if I tab back to plan 3000, what I can say is I can say that these ligatures go from this end all the way down to that end. And now we see a lot of ligatures there, and they might not be right because there's one in the middle. So okay, this is what you do to fix that. You click on the ligature, and then only thing you have to do is you've got to say, I want to change it to exact spacings. And then in the exact spacing bar, we know that the bottom part is 7 spaces at 125. And then from our measurement, we know we've got a 400 gap. And then on the opposite side, we've got 7 at 125 again. And once we do that and we say enter, we can now see that those ligatures are exactly as we've set out on our grid line. And this is one set going right across. Now, all we need to do is take this one. First of all, just before we do that, let's just flick across the elevation and have a look at our what do you call it, faces. Again, the bottom face has picked the orientation the wrong part. So what we can do is just click on that face and flip it across. And now if we go Control P, you'll see the ligatures within the slab. Okay. And at the moment, it's reading all the faces as 1, 1, 1, 1. Now take note, because there's no, if you look at this one, the face is in the middle of the bar, and it says leg 1. It's because there's no concrete face there. It can't apply a cover because there's nothing to apply the cover from. So in that case, this is where Tekla, if you click on that face now, this is where Tekla came up with this idea of you can flip a bar to either side. In this case, there's no either side, but you can offset it. And once you offset it, you'll realize which side it's going to flip, and then you can just toggle the flip to pick it the side you want. So it's pretty well thought of tool, I think. You know, these guys really did a good job. You know, when they got this cover thing working on the rebar sets. Now, once we've got that, is let's flip across to the plan 3000, and then I'll click on the bar, and then I'll go to end detail, and I'll just load my standards. Make sure that I've got a 90 degree, because these are always 90 degrees. The ears, if you have 135, it always causes problem. And then I think that's it. And now what we can do is you can hover over the edge. Just make sure that it actually gets the edge. So we can just hover over the edge and then hover over this edge. Now sometimes you can get away by just you know, picking on this edge now, but because sometimes when you have a leg that is sort of doesn't have an offset, it puts the hook on the wrong side. And this is why I picked 2 different end modifiers, because now what I can do is I can pick this one and I can just flick it around 180 degrees, and that's done. So that ligatures are in place and we're happy with them and they work. Okay, so let's go do the same on grid line B. So this is grid line B, it's the smaller one. So again, we can go to more, and we go to point input, linear, make sure that all our dimensions are correct. And because we have this already set up and we know that that other dimension is 900, we can just fix that up straight away. And now what we can do is, again, I'll go to the bottom here, holding my control key, click, go to the top because that's where I want the ear to start. We know it's a 300 column, click, just follow it around to complete your shape. And then middle mouse, and then go back to your top level, which is your 3000, and say that these go from here all the way to here. Now, just like that, we've now got the ligatures automatically in the right space. You can see center to center. There's 8 of them. They're 125 spacing exactly. And we skipped the 900 in the beginning. So that's a quick way of dealing with that. So now what we can do is just add the ears to this one as well. And also we just have to make sure that the layers still work. So for these, I'm just going to say standard to load them all. And I'll pick this one. That's correct. And then when I pick this side, just got to find the side. Oh, there we go. Sometimes it can be challenging if it doesn't find the leg. Sometimes you have to turn it around a bit. But okay. So it took me a while to find that, but I can already see that it looks like there's a problem there. So if I look at the elevation again, we've got an issue here. So this one, if we click on this one, now this is going to be the dominant. So that's in level 1. So this one has to be in level 2, which is correct. And this one, we first of all got to flick the switch. So to get that in the right elevation. And it seems like that one will be fine. Okay, so what we need to do now is if we go back to the 3000 level, which is the top level, all we need to do now is just to add our main reinforcement. Now, if I drag my sketch back in, you can also see they've got a dimension 500 typical of where these bars extend past the ligatures. So what we do is we just go Control O, 500 to the default, and we can just draw a little construction line so it gives us a point to measure from. And also this one, and also this one. And now what we can do is we can use by face again. We go near face, and I don't know which direction, and I've got to make it sure that it's rectangular. And in here, we've got to make sure that we've got our 12s, and I'll just change the color to yellow. And then this we want to clear because we want Tekla to try and calculate. It's going to have a problem with the calculation because there's no face it can measure from, but we'll fix that up now. And then for the spacings, we've got a number, and what he wants is 2 top, 2 bottom. So we have 2 bars. So that's it. So now that we know that, we can just click on this face and hover over to the top. And you can see our bar direction is wrong. So let's just flick it and go over to the top face. And that adds our 2 bars. And while we're there, we might as well do the bottom face. So we can just click on this one and repeat. So we go from here to here. And then we might as well do the other direction too. So we'll flick this one and flick this one. And we'll click on this one all the way to there. And then go into the bottom face and click the same direction from there to there. And now that we've done that, we can go over to the edges and see what's happened. So if I go to this big one first, we can see where what Tekla's done with this. So the first thing there is it's got the layer wrong. So you can see there's layers 3. So if we click on the layer, okay, let's just swing it around a bit. Let's click on the layer. We know that that's got to be 2. So that's the first thing we fix up is fix up the layer. And then if we go Control P, if we look at this bar, this ligature, we can see it's got a rounding radius of 24. So from this little tangential intersection point here, it's 24 millimeters to the inside, and then we need a half a bar. Okay, so if we take a 31 millimeters, so this bar is 12, but it's real. That's the nominal diameter, but the actual diameter is 14. So half of 14 is 7. So if we take this now and we plug in here 31 mils, and also in here 31 mils, and we say enter, you can see that it's actually put that bar in our center about that tangential sort of point from the arc into the straight line. And that's exactly where we want that bar. Now, knowing that, we can just do the same here and do 31 and then do 31 again and enter, and that fixes up that bar. So those bars are now sorted out. Now let's just look at the other direction. So we'll go to this view and have a look at what we've got here. So in here, we've pretty much got that bar in the right place and this in the right place, although this face can essentially be face 2. So if we click here and we make this face 2, that brings that up. So it hugs it better, just works better. As you can see there, it just works so much better. You do have a little bit of an issue, yeah, but they'll probably just move the bar across. Not a big drama. You just get Control P straight on, yeah. So that works pretty well. I mean, if I suppose you could go, yeah, and oh, it's picked a different. It's automatically picked something else than what I worked out. So let's just force the one I worked out, 31, and there we go, better dimension. And I'll do the same with the top. I'll just go 31 because I know 31, you know, I've worked it out mathematically and I know that's correct. It's exactly, if you look there, you can see the center of the bar is exactly at that tangential point, which is good. And yeah, you can see as well, we've got that tangential point in the bars in the middle. So that works really, really well. So now we've clash free there. Now to give this context, what I'm going to do is I'll just go across to our level 3000 again. And for this, I'm just going to switch off the construction lines. So if you click and you see it's already switched off, just make sure you've actually clicked in your view that you've got this yellow banner your view, and now you'll see it's updated, so we can switch it off. And now to give it context, let's give it some slab reinforcement. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say give us face again, and then let's pick. I'll just pick a different color, a different diameter. I beg your pardon. So let's make it 16s. And let's pick the red again, and then yeah, I'll just clear that, and for the spacing let's make it target and 200. Okay, so that's all done. And then top, we want both directions and we want the whole face. And now when I hover over this, we can now pick a main direction. So this one is going to be the main, so you can see let's put it out at the bottom, and now we can just flick across to the bottom again. We can then pick this edge, and that one's done it correctly. Now all we need to do here is to pick the secondary reinforcement and change it to green. It's good to have some form of assistance, a system with your coloring, so you can immediately see, you know, in terms of layers and in terms of bar diameters, what you're looking at. Now, what we need to do is just make sure that they're in the right level. You can see that that's gone to a different level because we added this before the slab. So what I'm going to do is click on that, click on the face, and then force that from 4 to 1, because we know this has got to be the first layer. And then also this one, we want to force from 4 to 2. That's the second layer. And we'll look at the ligatures in a minute. This one's got to be our first layer, so that goes to 1. This one, it's got to be our second layer. And now we can look at our ligatures and make sure that we've got that all sorted. So in the short direction, that seems to work quite well, as you can see there. That really, really works well. And in the long direction, it actually works well as well. There's no problems there. It's just like the slab reinforcement. We just need to look at the spacing for that. So if we go into the top view, 3000, and I'll just grab this, and I'll start off by just adding, say, 100 millimeters there as an offset. That sometimes just sorts the problem out. And it looks like it does. Yep, if we look at that, looks pretty good. Yep, that really works well. I mean, yeah, we've still got a bit of a problem with the bars going through the column. You can just move it, or otherwise what you can do is if you look at this, you can see we've got a spacing in the middle. So what we could do is just increase this or decrease it. Let's just increase it to 150, and then we should have a bar in the middle. It's just offset it a little bit. Okay, so that didn't work. If that doesn't work, I mean, obviously I'm just trying to get a clash-free situation here, but your slab will be different, so you might have to manually move that bar. And there we go. That's pretty much just sorted out except for there. So if we look at the spacing of these and we say give us an odd last and end spacing, if we say modify, yep, that sort of works. Yeah, that sort of works, you know. But I mean, that don't worry too much about the slab reinforcement, because I mean the slab is really big and there's a lot of reinforcement and they're all over the place and they're normally small bars. So you can just, you know, if there's a bar that clashes, you can basically just click on the bar, click on the splitter, and then go bring up your dimensions and say move edit, and you can just move that particular bar out of the way. So it's a pretty quick fix. Now that we've got that, what I'll do is I'll just double click again, and it's just going to have a look in perspective mode. And also what I'll do is I'll just load our rebar, modify, okay. And then what do we get? Okay, so in this case, you can see that our N12s have gone the opposite way. So what I can do is just in presentation here quickly, I can say that the 12s are normally this color, and I'll make it visible again. And then this time what we want to do is we want to make the slab reinforcement gray, and this I want to make 90. If I say save as, modify, apply, okay, we can now see what's happened here. So we've got our two beams intersecting each other. This big one being the dominant one, as you can see, it follows over the smaller one follows inside of it, and then this transparent bars on the outside is our 1 and 2 slab reinforcement. You can see how nicely that actually integrates with the other without having any clashes or issues. So it really works well. I mean, if we look at this bar, you can see how nicely it sits. Okay, it's quite transparent, but it actually sits on top of this in same plane as the ligature, and the same in the other direction. So that really came out quite well. Well, just before we finish up this exercise, there's one more thing that I'd like to show, and for that I'm just going to fix up the ortho mode and the display, and I'm going to go entire model. Sometimes with these bars, what I've done here is that I've got the bottom reinforcement actually going all the way through, and sometimes what happens is they will actually just let this reinforcement extend a little bit into the drop panel. It doesn't actually cross all the way through. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the slab, the drop panel, and the bottom reinforcement, say show only selected, go Control P, and now that I've got that, I can see where the drop panel outline is. I can also see the bottom reinforcement. So all I have to do to chop those out is I grab both of them, or what I can do is I can go to Edit, and I can say Part Cut, and the part I want to cut is these two, and you've got to just make sure that you don't select your slab. And I think I've just duffed that one. Let me just undo that quickly again, and I'll select these two bars. Make sure that you've got 4 objects that selected all the bars. Let me just redo that. I beg your pardon, I just accidentally clicked on the wrong stuff there. So if we just isolate those one more time, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for the part cut, select area for multiple parts. Now it's tricky when you have a scenario where you've got a slab in the way, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want to pick these 2 reinforcement bars, and you can see that we've picked the 2 reinforcement bars, and the cutting part I can now click the just make sure that I see the bottom. I can click the actual drop panel, and that will actually clip the bottom 2 layer bars for us to the size of the panel. Now the only thing that we need to do is if we click on the actual physical cut, we can then say change this dimension from the middle with I think for a 16 bar 700 350, let's make it 400, so let's make that 900. If we make that 900, you can see how that extends in. That one actually ends up crossing all the way, and if we take this one and do the same, 900, that extends those. Actually in this direction we don't have to extend that, we can keep that like that. Okay, and then in the other direction, if we click on this one, we can then say we want to extend this way. So it's the top one. If we make that 900 now, you can see how those bars then extend into that. And now if we do a redraw and we look at this clearly, let's go to the rendered view and switch off our, again, make sure that you've clicked in it, switch off the construction lines, and then go back to this panel, do a redraw, all, pick this one, isolate it. Okay, now that we've got that, we can go back to our double click in the screen, go back to our perspective mode, modify OK. And now if we look at that, we can see the bottom reinforcement only projects, whatever is that the engineer requires to project, but it projects in there. So the reason I did that was just to show you guys that should you cut out reinforcement, you can cut it out by selecting a part cut. it's very easy to fix things like that. I've had a lot of queries in the past where people say that, you know, the reinforcement, there's a hole in the slab. They put a hole in the slab and I can't cut the reinforcement. If you're using rebar sets, it's fairly simple. You can do it. So, hopefully this was useful and hopefully you've learned something from it, even if it's just a technique here or there. And, apply these techniques to your project and, I'll see you in the next video.